Welcome back to What She Said. Last week, we learned about the tragic loss of Lincoln Park's Chester Bennington. And with more and more people struggling with depression and mental health issues, we are joined tonight by clinical therapist and mental health expert Megan Rafuse to talk about this topic that hits home for many. Welcome, Megan, to What She Said.
Thank you so much for having me.
First, tell us a little bit about what you do, how you help people.
So I am a registered social worker by background. And what that means is I act as a therapist and I see primarily adults, professionals, ambitious professionals, to work with them on dealing with challenges like anxiety, depression, mood disorder through a number of research-based therapies. And so basically, if you're struggling, if you're feeling like you're not coping, if you're not getting along with your spouse or your best friend, that's when you come see me.
Kind of an obvious question, Megan. How do you tell if someone is struggling with mental health issues or even thoughts of suicide? Are there some red flags we can look for, some warning signs? Because it seems like these always come up as such a surprise and a shock, and we all had no idea. How can you forecast this?
Right. So I think the biggest part of recognizing when the people we love are struggling is that we need to ask questions. You know, we're so good at being like, how are you? How are things? How is everything going? But when we know someone we love is struggling, we need to ask the difficult questions. So we need to say, I know you had a breakup recently, or I know you were diagnosed with depression, or hey, you've been missing work. What's going on? I'm here for you. Let's talk about it. So what we want to look for is signs of depression, whether our family member, our loved one, our friends are isolating themselves. If you're noticing changes in their weight, whether extreme weight loss or weight gain. If you're finding that you're asking them to hang out and they're saying, no, I'm too busy, or no, I can't, or you know what, I really didn't sleep well last night. It's good to probe a little bit, right? So depression wants us to isolate. It wants us to hide. What we need to do is say, is everything okay? I'm here for you. You don't have to hide. And when we open up the dialogue and be authentic and be real with the people that we love, usually we find that these challenges come out. We see it. Our friends tell us. So when we think about suicide and suicide awareness, what we really need to do is ask those hard questions. We need to say, are you thinking of killing yourself? Has this been something you've been having thoughts of? How are you coping through your day and what does that look like? We know that when it comes to suicide, the number of completed suicides can be prevented. The stat is about actually 90% of people who complete suicide are living with mental illness, and that is a treatable mental illness. So 90% of suicides can actually be prevented.
So is that why you believe that the conversation about suicide is so important?
Yes, the dialogue is so important. We need to open up and talk about it because suicide rates increase when we don't have support, when we're isolated, when we're alone. We know that the general population, about 15 people of every 100,000 people are likely to complete suicide. That's the stat. We know for specific populations like the Indigenous population, that number is 4 times higher. So that means out of every 100,000 people, it's about 60 to 75 people who actually complete suicide. So we do a lot of talking about celebrities, but what we really need to do is say, hey, what's happening in our own backyard? What's happening with our children? What's going on with our neighbors? How do we talk about this so that people feel loved and supported? What happens is we're afraid of talking about it. I mean,
and we're considered nosy.
Stigmas.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. It's, we're told, don't get into the other person's business, or, okay, well, my coworker doesn't want to talk about it, so I'm not going to probe. But we know that talking about it and being authentic helps to beat the stigma. The other thing that helps to beat the stigma is to say, you're having a challenge. Here are the supports available. So talking about it isn't enough because then we need to take action. So we need to be mindful of what's available in the community.
So how do we take action when it's for somebody else that may not be a family member?
Right.
Yep. So what we need to do is bring it up. We need to say, I'm worried about you. Oftentimes people who are considering suicide will put out what we call invitations. So that means, you know what, I'm really not happy, or I've been thinking of going away, or, I really want to give away my stuff, or, I was really feeling blue and I'm having thoughts like, what's the point? What's the point of all of this? We need to listen to those invitations. People who are having thoughts of suicide will tell you. And it's your job, instead of shaming the individual, instead of saying, you shouldn't think that way, don't feel that way, which we're really good at because we don't know how to help. That's what we do, right? When someone's worried, we say, oh, you can get better. Just go for a run, do yoga. We're really good at throwing out self-care ideas. But what we need to do is normalize and say, that must be so hard. It must be difficult to have those thoughts. Are you thinking of hurting or killing yourself? I'm here for you. And then you take action. And action might mean, if they're actively suicidal, if they're saying, I have a plan and I have means to act on this plan. So, I have access to substance. I've been doing drugs or drinking, which we hear often in the media, especially with Chester Bennington, right? There's all the articles. Well, there was no drugs found in the home, or there was drugs. So access to substance actually increases our likelihood of completing suicide. We're more impulsive when we use substance, and it gives us a mean. So what we need to do is ask those difficult questions. Who are the people that can support you? Who's that person in your life that you would call for help? So these are the questions you want to be asking the people you're concerned about. And you can make recommendations. If you're actively suicidal, let's call the distress center. Let's call together because I'm worried about you.
Now, Megan, you're the director of Shift Collaborative Therapy. What's collaborative therapy?
We get asked that question a lot. And so I founded a therapy clinic because oftentimes in the therapy world, therapists feel like we are lone wolves. So we often work independently. We don't tend to collaborate. But what we need to do is work together with our clients. So clients feel like lone wolves. Let's build a community. Let's say, how do we work together to best meet your needs? Then what we do is at Shift, we put a major focus on, well, why don't we pull your doctor into this conversation? What would it look like to connect with your doctor and talk about medication, to talk about medication management, side effects? You're sleeping. We need to sleep appropriately to manage our functioning and mental health. So, let's talk about a referral to that sleep clinic. Let's talk about taking a leave from work if that's what you need. And oftentimes when it comes to workplace wellness, we need the doctor involved in the equation. So at Shift, we really pride ourselves on a holistic focus. Maybe it's, let's talk to your naturopath. Why don't you go to physio to deal with your chronic pain, and we can deal with the anxiety that comes up with it. So rather than, you see your therapist in a bubble because there's been shame about going to therapy, we say, let's make this a team. You are deserving of being mentally well, just as you're deserving of having good eye care and, having good health care. So let's add our mental wellness to part of that package. And what we find is our clients are really happy with it. They have really great outcomes with treatment. So we find collaboration in mental health is really important.
I think that approach to me sounds wonderful because, it's like the right hand actually does know what the left hand is doing. Because so often you hear about, one doctor prescribed this and then somebody was over-prescribed for medications that may have conflicted. That's fabulous. And obviously it's confidential counseling. Everything's kept within the professions.
Yes. So we only share if you consent to sharing.
Oh, that's good. So how can people get in touch with you?
Yeah, so you can find us online at www.shiftcollab.com. You can also find me at meganrafuse.com or on Twitter and Instagram at shift_collab.
So what's the one message, if you had one key thing that you could say to everybody listening or watching about being able to tell when somebody is going through great pain?
I think it's listening to yourself. Our gut tells us when people that we love are struggling, and it's about listening to that. And it's about allowing yourself to be authentic, to ask, because connection is our biggest buffer against mental health, and reaching out bridges that.
Megan, thank you so much for joining us tonight. I could sit here and listen to you all night. This is so important and such an important topic to discuss. So thank you for everything that you do. This is What She Said. Stay with us.